Yesterday, there was an election in Saxony, Anhalt. This is one of the 6 German states in the former East Germany. And there's a few different conflicting narratives I've seen being spread around social media. In the English-speaking world, a lot of people are saying that this election was a huge victory for conservatives and a big defeat for the left. Meanwhile, the left and the media are saying that this was a huge blow to the so-called far right and that the far right has finally been stopped in the former Eastern Germany. Now, I don't think either one of these narratives is correct. I'm going to try to break this down. First of all, there's 6 states in the former East Germany. And there's a relatively new party called Alternative for Deutschland, Alternative for Germany, or AfD. And this is a conservative party. It's not extremist. It's not far right. In fact, if you look at campaign literature from the Christian Democrats from the late 90s, there's hardly any difference between their literature in the late 90s and the AfD today. But Angela Merkel has been pushing the Christian Democrats, the CDU, far to the left for the past 20 years. Now, in 2016, the AfD scored 20.8% in Mecklenburg, 14.2% in Berlin, 24.3% in Saxony-Anhalt, and they got second place in Mecklenburg and Saxony-Anhalt. And then in 2019, I had YouTube videos about each of these 3 elections. The AfD came in second place in each one, 27.5% in Saxony, 23.5% in Brandenburg, 23.4% in Thuringia. And in each one of these elections in 2019, the media went ballistic, screaming that the extreme far right could come in first place, and this is horrible, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to Germany ever in its entire history. And so each time you actually had people change their vote at the last minute just to make sure that the AfD didn't come in first place. And of course, what this showed is that the CDU and some of the other parties are just merging into a big uniparty, and that people felt comfortable switching their vote to other parties within this uniparty. And so here's the official results from yesterday, and what we find happening is the most extreme example yet of people switching their vote at the last minute just to try to keep the AfD from coming in first place. And so the first set of numbers here reflect what each party was polling ahead of the election. And so the CDU was supposed to get somewhere in the 25 to 29% range, the AfD somewhere in the 23 to 26. For the week ahead of the election, the media was going bonkers, claiming the extreme far right might come in first place, and this would be the worst thing that's ever happened. And on election day, we're told that the CDU exceeded the polls by a quarter. They got a quarter more votes than what the polls predicted, and the AfD got fewer votes. And so the left is celebrating, the media is celebrating. They're saying that the AfD has finally been stopped. This is their first big setback in the former Eastern Germany. Of course, they still came in a very strong second place. They're still almost double the third place party. And the fact is that the CDU Prime Minister for Saxony-Anhalt is actually very popular. He's one of the more popular state leaders in Germany right now. And so a lot of people felt comfortable switching over to the CDU. And it looks like, based on the polling data, a lot of people crossed over from the SPD, the Green Party, the Free Democrats. Now, Die Linke, the left, which is the former East German Communist Party, they basically got dead on with what the polls said. Well, the CDU also does in coalition with Die Linke. And so Die Linke's voters voted for Die Linke, whereas you had people for the SPD and the Green Party, even though these are left-wing parties. The Green Party is really Marxist far left. You had a lot of those people change their vote at the last minute. The media is suggesting that a lot of AFD voters changed their mind at the last minute. Now, the media is always trying to say that the AFD has a ceiling, that there's only so many votes they can get. And I've talked about this in previous videos. In the past election, Der Spiegel, one of the biggest publications in Germany, always did this really elaborate breakdown for each election in East Germany. And they showed where voters came from each party. And I haven't seen a breakdown like that for this election, but in past election, the AFD got huge amounts of their voters from people who normally don't vote. And so they were always the biggest winners in getting people who normally don't even vote to come to the polls. And they also took a lot of people from a lot of former CDU voters, but they also took a lot of former left-wing voters too. Well, there's still huge numbers of people who still don't vote. There's still huge numbers of CDU voters that can be won over because Merkel is still ever pushing the CDU further and further to the left. So really, there is no low ceiling for the AFD. There's a huge amount of room they can still grow. Now, the CDU, their core voter base tend to be older conservatives, particularly for this area. This is one of the more conservative areas of Germany. And so the CDU's core base are older conservatives who just keep voting CDU out of force of habit. And I guess they don't really pay attention to what the national CDU is doing. They say, well, I like what our local guy's doing, so I'll just keep voting for him. After the 2016 election, the CDU refused to form a coalition with the AFD. And now Angela Merkel has threatened punitive action against any CDU member who even suggests that maybe in the future they should consider forming coalitions with the AFD. Merkel has completely shut that down. It's a complete subversion of democracy. If you believe in the basic principles of democracy, you have to believe that you should respect the will of the voters and that you have to cooperate peacefully with all the other major parties. Well, Merkel does not believe that. She says it openly. And she threatens action against other members of the CDU who advocate these basic democratic principles. And so if we look at this right here, it seems blatantly obvious that the CDU should form a coalition with the AFD because they represent 2 out of every 3 people elected. And if they had a coalition together, it would represent 2/3 of the voters. But just like they're not going to do that because Merkel's not going to let them. In 2016, not only did they not coalition with the AFD, but they included the really far left Green Party into their coalition. So they snubbed the AFD in coalition with the Social Democrats and the Green Party. Now, the way that the government of Saxony, Anhalt, can move to the right because of this election is because the Free Democrats won seats this time. So in 2016, they did not make the 5% minimum threshold. This time, the Free Democrats won seats. Now, the Free Democrats are the Liberal Party, but in Northern Europe, liberal doesn't mean the same thing that it does in America. Basically, they're like a free market centrist party, and they are an alternative to the CDU. And the Free Democrats have been on the rise in Eastern Europe, basically because people are fed up with the CDU. And then there's also, they're not going to get any seats, but the Free Voters got 3.1%. This is also like a centrist, center-right party that's really campaigning as being a direct alternative to the CDU. But basically, the Social Democrats and the Green Party did do very poorly because a bunch of their voters jumped ship. It is a good thing that the Green Party did so poorly, because the Green Party is the darling of the German media right now. The Green Party is supposed to be the future of Germany. It's a party that George Soros and all the wealthy leftists support now. But they did poorly. It would have been even much better if the Green Party got below 5%, because then they wouldn't have gotten any seats at all. But that didn't happen. At any rate, this is far from a big defeat for the AFD, because they still got a very strong second place, and they got it in an election where the leader of the CDU is very popular in this state. But it's also, I wouldn't say it's a huge victory for the right, because the CDU, even though it's much more conservative in this part of Germany than it is on a national level, it's still not even really a center-right party anymore. All right, thanks for watching this video. Click the like button, post a comment below. Also, check out my last video on the history of the witchcraft tribunals and how it relates to politics today. I think it's one of my best videos I've ever made, although YouTube's not giving it any distribution. So go and check that out. And click the subscribe button. New video every few days. All right, at the end of my last video, I did a card trick, and some of you actually stuck around and watched it and posted comments about it, so that was cool. I'm going to try something else. I did a move called the hot shot cut last time, which is a really common thing. This is my own creation. This is the Renaissance reveal. So once again, let's get you a randomly selected card. This is a completely random card. I don't know what it is. And we'll get this shuffled in. It's super humid out, so the cards are sticking to my fingers bad, but hopefully I can still pull this off and not drop all the cards. All right, what I'm going to do now is take the entire deck and stick it inside the tuck box. And I want you to notice that the bottom is still glued shut. It's legit still sealed at the bottom. The flap is really over all the cards. There's nothing peeking out there. All right. This is the Renaissance reveal. Is this your card?